Good evening, everybody. So in this conversation this evening, I wanted to talk about inspiration versus inspired action as a topic. I've certainly felt like sometimes, intuition or inspired action. I'm going to start that again. In this conversation, I'd like to talk about intuition versus inspired action. And I'm going to delve a little bit into what I mean by that. And then I'd love to hear your stories and your thoughts and your questions on this subject. So I've certainly felt from time to time that I've had to wait for intuition. And I've heard other people talking about that. And sometimes, I don't know if this is the same for anybody else, but sometimes that has almost demobilized me. So instead of just doing what's in front of me, I've been waiting to see what's right, or waiting for a feeling to know if I should do something. And I've got a really big example where I was invited to be on the faculty of an organisation that I'd actually previously been a student of, and to work with them. And I didn't know if I wanted to do that or not. And I couldn't tell. I sort of felt as though I'd had some wisdom about it, but then I couldn't tell what was wisdom and what was me thinking. And I just really wasn't sure. And then I went into weeks really of trying to figure it out and wanting to have a moment of, oh, yes, that's it. This is what you need to be doing, because this is going to mean this. And, you know, this is how that's going to pan out. And that never happened, funnily enough. And so I felt as though, well, if I don't get that inspiration to do that, if I don't get that sort of intuition, if that's not the right thing, then maybe I shouldn't do it. And I went back and forth. And then, of course, there's the old traditional pros and cons list, you know, and people said, oh, make a list of pros and cons and everything. And that doesn't really help, because you're always going to weight it to which one you actually want. And I've done it before where the cons have definitely outweighed the pros, but I want to do it anyway. So I've ignored that. So that didn't really help. And then there was the, you know, toss a coin and, it, you know, think, oh, heads, I'll do it, tails, I won't. And then that's the one that you're meant to be like, the one that you really want to do. And I've used that on people as well, but that didn't work, because I still go, well, yeah, I'm not really sure. Is it the right thing? Anyway, this went on for weeks and I couldn't feel it, like if it was right or not. And then one day I had the thought, well, just do it. And if you don't like it, you can stop doing it. And it was really simple. And so that's what I did. And I ended up working with that organisation for 3 years. So it really showed me that sometimes we make it more complicated, because we're, or for me anyway, hoping for some sort of flash, or hoping for some sort of intuition to know that's exactly the right thing. And I know we've talked before about decision fatigue and getting overwhelmed with what the decision should be. What I realise now is, in that moment where I had that, well, just do it, and then if you don't like it, leave, that was intuition. And that intuition didn't mean that's the right decision. It just took everything else off the table. It just meant now you feel better, now you'll know whether or not to do it. So it could have been that I had that just do it and you'll find out, and the next morning woke up and gone, no, I really don't want to. Or it could have been that I went and did that thing and then didn't like it, but I already knew that I had the option to leave, so I could have not, left after one commitment. Or it could have been a load of other things. But just going with the simple sort of answer of, okay, well, just do it. I realise now, looking back, that was very much an inspired action, and it didn't have any thought on it. It was just like, oh well, that's what I've decided to do now, and I did it. And like I say, I was with that organization for a long time, and I met loads of wonderful people through there, and it was really amazing. Looking back, I can see that it was absolutely the right thing to do, but I didn't know in the moment. And I could probably come up with quite a few other examples like that where I didn't know. Another one that's a bit more fun in a way was Dazzle and I did a YouTube channel called Mindset Runners. And it all started because we were doing Catch to 5K with a group of people, and we used to do little videos about how each run went. Those videos were never meant to go anywhere apart from in our own private group. And one day I published one of mine on Instagram, and I got more comments about how people felt inspired on that than I do ever get on my prison work or anything else. So I got all these comments and all these people saying it's so inspiring, and the way you talk about the principles is so easy, and all of this. And I wasn't talking about the principles, I was just talking about life. And because of that, I thought, wow, I could do a YouTube channel. And so I started in my own little way with this YouTube channel, knew nothing. I learned how to do a bit of editing and learned how to put videos up. And then very fortunately, Dazzle soon came into the picture and supported me and started helping me with the editing, and then started getting involved in the channel. And we produced a video every week for about 18 months. And a 5-minute video is about 5 to 10 hours of work. So with the filming and the setting up and the editing and all of that, it's about 5 to 10. So there was a lot of work, and the research and the coming up with subjects and everything else. And Papa said to me, why are you doing it? What's it for? And I said, I don't know, but I love it. And so I carried on doing it. And it was amazing, and we both loved it. And then it came to a time when it started to be a struggle to think about what subjects and to get the video out on time, and all of these factors started to creep into what we were doing. So some of the joy went out of it, and it became a task, right? Oh yeah, gotta do the grind and get the videos out this week. What I really trust is that things have their own time. So when it started to become a grind, that's when I sort of went, hang on, this is a grind and this is for fun. Shall we pause? And we'd invested so much time and effort into this channel. It might have looked like, well, yeah, but to pause now, we're going to lose all the momentum that we've got and everything else. But we've discussed it and we said, okay, well, let's pause. And it could have been that we paused for a couple of months And then we wanted to do it again. And we've revisited a couple of times and thought, shall we do this and shall we do that? But in actual fact, now I think a year later, or maybe 2 years, I can't remember now, but at least a year later, we haven't published any videos on there at all. So it was the right decision for then, but we didn't know that. It just felt like, yeah, let's stop. So intuition and inspired action can also be stopping something, not just starting something. And then there was one final example that I wanted to give you that I can't remember. So I won't give that to you. So it seems to me that we are always being fed by our intuition. Almost, I'd even go so far to say pretty much all day long. We're not sitting and waiting for that and listening to that, but we're sort of being fed. And simple things like stepping outside to get some air, or taking some drink of water, or suddenly thinking about an email you need to write, or all of these simple things are things that are occurring to us out of intuition. But when we think about intuition, we make it more complicated, and we try to put some sort of form on it, whereas it is just formless energy that is occurring to us in the moment. And for me, like back in the day when I didn't know about intuition and I didn't know that I even had intuition, well, maybe that's not true. I've always thought that I've been intuitive in some areas, but I haven't always acted on it. What it seems to me is that there's always an obvious thought or step to take that may not look like the answer to the thing that you're looking for. So if you circle back to the mindset runners, we learned so much during that time, and it wasn't deliberate that that's what we wanted to do it for. We were just doing it for fun. But we both learned so much about everything to do with content creation, digital content creation. That improved, obviously, beyond recovery. So it improved wisdom webinars, it improved content that we now put out, updates and online courses and all of these other things that we didn't know that was what was happening, but it gave us the background and the foundation of being able to produce something now. So there's the sort of, everything feeds into whatever you're doing, even if you don't know how or why. But by just taking what I call inspired action, and I mean a step that just seems obvious, it seems as though you're more in alignment with intuition, and it's less complicated. And a person that I used to work with said, sometimes it looks like, today I'm going to clean out the toolbox. Like nothing to do with these big life decisions that I want to make, but today I want to clean out the toolbox. And she cleaned out the toolbox, and cleaning out the toolbox actually gave her like a cathartic sort of space, almost meditative space. And in that meditative space, when she wasn't thinking about this big life decision, some idea occurred to her about that, some very small thing occurred to her about that she then followed. So I'm going to pause, but in summary of all of that, it looks like to me that when we look for intuition, we're looking for some big picture sort of answers, but actually small inspired actions, small steps are the things that unlock that and open that further. So I have more to say, but I thought we could pause and just check in for any thoughts or questions or stories.
I'd love to jump in. It felt terrible to end our work on Mindset Runners. It felt like, oh my god, we've done all of this, and we're just going to stop it. But actually, up to that point, it was feeling terrible already, because it was a grind, and it wasn't the same passion, and that was because maybe we hadn't quite orientated ourselves with processes that had made it easier for us, and then we were trying to think of these processes like, well, if we do 4 videos in advance, then we'll have the space to think. And like, can you feel that energy? It comes across. It was like, it was a mad, frantic rush constantly, and then it felt terrible to even talk about it, to go, because both of us were thinking it. Both of us were already like, we already want to step away from this project, but we don't want to let the other person down. But just having the inspiration to have that conversation, or take the inspired action to have that conversation, actually took the weight off both of us massively. And it's not the end of the world. Like, you can always go back to stuff. You can always find this. You can always find that. But the fact of the matter was, we just didn't have the space or the time for it at that point. It's really, yeah, it's interesting looking at it now, but you don't see that perspective until you've taken that action. You can't look forward. Of course, you can only guess or make educated presumptions on what's going to happen, but you've just got to take the action to see what actually happens. And ultimately, it was the feeling that guided us, because if it felt terrible, so stop doing it. It's that easy, isn't it, really? And I know that's a very specific topic, but I found that with other things. I'll probably think of things during the next webinar, during this webinar, but I know that there are other times where go with the feeling of it and do the action, regardless to what you think the consequences might be. That's what I took from that.
Yeah. And on a sort of slightly different, worked out differently, but it's exactly the same thing, is that I started wisdom webinars in 2016, I think. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I'd been thinking about it for a while. And it actually all came about at a conference that I was at. And then somebody said, have you thought about doing mentoring with people and I was like, oh no, that's not really what I do. I work in prison. And they said, well, you know, you really inspire people, so you should do webinars or something. I said, well, I have been thinking about doing this thing. And so that's how the original, which was Wisdom Entrepreneurs, started. And every time I sat in front of that computer to do a webinar, I felt absolutely terrible, like a fake. What am I doing here? What about if I can't think of anything to say? What about if nobody turns up, etc.? And sometimes maybe only 2 people turned up. But that wasn't the same feeling of that, I think this is done, or I think we should pause right now. That feeling was more of a insecurity, because by the time I started the webinar and started talking to people, I loved it, you know, and I'd come off on a high, and I always used to feel like I'd just swanked off the stage, you know, at the end of it. And I used to always think that I should have a celebration after everyone. I enjoyed it so much, and, you know, be treated like royalty. So I knew that was insecurity. But there were times in that journey, and what's that, 7 years? There's at least 6 years of wisdom webinars now. There are times along this journey where I have thought, are we done? Is wisdom entrepreneurs done? And every time I've asked that question, it's been from an open space of, because if we're done, and that's okay. And if we're not, I'll know the answer. And every single time something's occurred. So the very first time I asked that question, I thought maybe this is the last one. And someone came onto that webinar that evening whose son, I think, had been in prison, and they were so relieved to have that conversation. So I think there was 2 people turned up that night, and so that was my answer. If this helps one person, that's enough. And so I carried on. And then there were other changes along the way, like some of the boys got out of prison, and then they came on, and then people wanted to hear their stories, and then there was another iteration, and so on and so forth. So every single time I've genuinely asked the question, are we done now? And every single time I know whether we're not. So far we've not been. During lockdown, we made them weekly to support people and to have a place where people, the family could meet and we could have conversations together. And that was a lot of webinars in a short period of time. So I think for around about 18 months. And then it became obvious, right, that's enough now. It doesn't need to be weekly anymore. Now it can move to monthly again. And I asked the question, should it be quarterly? But each time I feel as though I know what the next step is, and I'm open to whatever that answer might be. And not a lot of thinking, not a lot of, how much time does it take me and all of that. None of that comes into it. The minute that comes into it, there's a red flag. The minute that it starts to be, well, this takes up all this time and it becomes a grind, as you just said, then that's the red flag of saying, oh, okay, hang on a minute, let's take a step back. So inspired action can be starting something and it can be stopping something.
It's a back and forth, sorry. Very interesting, because I started to connect the dots with an insight I had a few years ago on running. And the insight was, like, I just didn't feel motivated. And for my whole life, I've struggled with motivation to do something. You're either motivated to do it or you're not. And I beat myself up massively when I wasn't motivated to do something. And running taught me that sometimes I don't want to go for a run. Sometimes I just don't want to put my trainers on and I don't want to get out the door. But at that point in my life, I was running quite frequent 10Ks, maybe 2 10Ks a week. And I learned to ignore the motivation side of things. And I would just put my trainers on and I would just go out for my run, and on whatever day it was planned for. And within the first or second kilometre of a 10K run, so very, very early on in the run, the first 10 minutes of the run, I was in love with it. And I was so happy that I was out. And after the run, I was absolutely blown up with positivity. And of course it was great to go out for a run and whatever. But that can be very disguised as the grind that you were just talking about. So one thing that I certainly I can see the difference with me, especially the difference between feeling like a grind and feeling like I'm unmotivated to do something. If something feels like it's going to be tough for me to do because I can't really be bothered to do it, that's not that's not my intuition kicking in to say this shouldn't be something you should be doing. That's my lack of motivation, or my energy's a little bit lower. And if I want to do it, if I can see myself still running in the future, like, oh, should I give running up? Yeah, of course, give running up. If that question comes up, you don't want to run anymore, give it up. But if you go, oh, I can't really be bothered today, yeah, okay, maybe push it till tomorrow, or do whatever you do, but get out and do it still. That's where I've learned from that. Whereas the other things, like projects that feel like, I actually felt, you feel dread for things coming up, like, oh no, I've got to do another one of these, or the work that goes into it, or whatever it is. I'm trying to find the terminology that where I find that separation, but there is a separation of a lack of motivation, and when your intuition kicks in, there is a separation there. Yeah, you're nodding because I think you know as well.
I do. And I think that I would always say, don't wait for motivation.
Brilliant.
Motivation comes from doing it, not beforehand. So we get that mixed up, don't we? We think that we should be motivated, where actually, because we've talked about running as well, and for me, if I'm not thinking and I'm just getting up and putting my trainers on and getting out the door, I don't even wait for I'm not motivated. I'm just not thinking, and I'm doing what I've committed to do, and I'm doing it because long term I want to do it. On an individual basis, of course, I think, oh, the weather, or whatever. But I'm not waiting for motivation. Whereas, I'm going to pause because there's a couple of questions. People can't get into the meeting, so I'm going to. So sorry about this, everybody, and I promised I would let them in. I'm going to send them the calendar invite. That would be the easiest thing to do. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Back up from the tech guy.
We need a little slideshow. Beyond Recovery slideshow. Anything I can do to help, or you want it?
I'm on it. Thank you. I'm not even saying something. I'm just sending them the link. I'm back. So that's right. So if I wait for motivation, I'll often wait forever. Whereas I really feel that, and running is a good example, that the motivation comes from the actual act of just doing it, of taking that step. I'm a person who loves different projects. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and she's very much like me. And she said, it's almost like you could never do all the projects you wanted to do in one lifetime. So there's 4 different Jacquelines in 4 different lives. And it's like, which life does this Jacqueline want? And some other alternative life, like I wanted to learn magic, for instance. And there's a Jacqueline in her alternative life right now learning magic. You don't have to do it in this life. And I really liked that sort of analogy, because it felt like it's not that I need to wait for the motivation to learn magic or look for how does that fit in with my diary or something, because the things that I want to do, I just do them without even thinking about how I feel motivated or not. They just get done. I just take those next steps. And the things that actually seem like really good ideas, but aren't sort of meant to happen, they're just like nice ideas and nice thoughts, that alternative Jacqueline is doing, that alternative MamaJ in her other life. She's probably called something else as well. But I sort of like that idea. It feels like I've gone a bit off track there. So I'm just going to bring it back. Any of that stuff, motivation, inspiration, all of that is an idea of what the feeling should look like to get something, to do something. It's not a rule. Whereas just not worrying about that and just doing what seems obvious and next is just makes your life happen a bit more easily. I'll pause for the question from the Wilson.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, what's going on, everybody? You all right? Hey, MamaJ, hey, Dazzle. I was just gonna say, because I've just been sitting here thinking, and I'm just like, for me, motivation is it's one of those perception words, because I realized growing up, we created our own motivation through thinking. So it's like when we thought about, when you thought about something would be great after doing it, and you have that whole thought process of 10 years in 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Or do you know what I mean? You think about going in a course, and after this course, I can get this and I can get that and I can get this and I should be that. So for somehow you draw your motivation from that thought. But I realize when you're not, if you don't really, so me before the principles, I would see those thoughts as motivation. All of those thoughts that I create, I would see them as that's the motivation to do that. And it might fail, and then I might create new motivation to do something else. But now I kind of see that, as you guys are saying, motivation comes from the feeling of like, for me as well, because I'm thinking about football, and my motivation to play football comes off of the football I've played in the past, if that makes sense. So I know I enjoy it, I know I love it, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do that again. So it's like, even now I'm on a new venture, and I'm like, I've never been here before, so the motivation's quite low because I'm not sure where it's gonna go. But I realize I'm not creating where it's gonna go anymore. So the motivation is kind of in the unknown. It's like, oh, like let's see where it goes. Let's see what happens. Let's see what we can do. So it's it's motivation is kind of a sticky word, because I see that I've seen it different many times. I've seen motivation different many times, and yeah, when somebody says motivational now, I kind of see that as not something that everybody can take from. It's something that you take from it what you take. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that word motivation kind of, it's a sticky one.
Love it. Love it. So, totally get where you're at there as well. Yeah, I love that.
Appreciate it.
Go on, Alfie.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what Wilson's saying, because what was also standing out for me was, well, like my whole getting my knickers in a twist with decisions. And what's so interesting is just like pondering recently, like how I think I'm deciding about something, like you talking about, will you tutor that, but go back and tutor that, be a tutor in whatever it was, work for your course company or something. And so we sit there thinking, do I want to do that or don't I want to do that, with an idea of what we think we're choosing in that decision, when actually the choice we're making to step into something or not could be a step that's leading to something completely unexpected that we don't know until we've made the step. And it's a bit like Wilson saying doing a new thing. We're stepping into something, but we don't really know where that's taking us. So even when we think we're deciding, we're not really ever aware of what we're really deciding, are we? We're just following something in the moment. And I guess that's what feels edgy in a way, or that's what the surrendering is in a way, is that we're sort of following an impulse that's leading somewhere that we'll never really know. So we almost don't actually really know what we're deciding when we make a choice. And perhaps that's what's kind of a bit edgy in it, that surrender that's sort of necessary. And I'm also thinking how I can beat myself up from, I don't know, getting to the end of the day and thinking that I didn't take action for things that I feel like I should have done or something, and how actually maybe there's something about that that's perfect, or like waking up with, say, dread in my stomach because, oh no, this topic or this email or this situation that I still haven't faced, and knowing how much that's me just being in the way when actually it's perfect and the email will get answered in the perfect time and it's not about anything to do with me, versus me. And I suppose this is a bit like Dazzle with his running or motivation or something. What is actually just this system just doesn't have capacity to answer that email right now. So it might be like the perfect thing that needs doing, but actually maybe it's recognizing that just sitting in front of the email and letting the feelings come up about that and just building the capacity to be with that kind of and be kind to that, and then at some point a response will happen. And so even if there's not motivation or ability to do it, it's also okay if we can complete the whole thing. And it all comes down to a kind of kindness or something, isn't it, that things will get done, but is there where's the kindness in this or something? Like, I don't know really what I'm rambling there, but that's what came to me.
I love it. And I would say that I've had weeks where I thought this is what I was doing that week. And then that's been turned totally on its head because of something completely unexpected. And I've recently had one of those weeks. In fact, 10 days, 16 days. And as I was saying, and then I could look at what I haven't done that I was expected to do, and I could get my knickers in a twist, or I could just accept that that's what life gave me. That's what life gave me, and there's a gift in that, and there's a joy in that, and there's a blessing in that. And that now's not the time to look at what I didn't get done and beat myself up and try and cram that in. Now's the time to go, oh, okay, what happened to me was I got overwhelmed with all the extra thing to do. And then I thought, maybe this is giving me the opportunity to drop some stuff. Maybe this is actually giving me the opportunity to go, okay, you're doing too many things. What are the things that you want to do, or that are going to be done? I don't want to sort of say want to, because that brings another thing into it. But what are the things you're going to put aside? And actually, when I moved into that, there are things that have dropped away. And somehow this other space for something that I want to get, like the crowdfund for my book, my memoir, which I really do want to do, that started now to come back into play. but without me having to get up at 4 o'clock and work on it. So there's a perfection that's happening all the time. And that's one little story from my little life. But COVID pandemic showed all of us that, didn't it? Because it stopped everything that we thought on, let's say, the 17th of March 2020 about what we were going to be doing for the next 6 months was completely different on the 18th of March 2020 when it was announced we were all going to be locked down. And that taught us that life is not linear, and what we make up about what it looks like, the decisions look like we're making a decision forever, but the decisions are just in the moment decisions, literally at any time, no matter what perceived impact on our lives that has, is actually a decision for now. That's all.
Wow. That stitches together so much with what I resonated with what Alfie was saying. So be kind to yourself was something that was hanging out when you were speaking, because if later on, after a opportunity has been missed, which is utter tosh, if your mind starts to come back to, or my mind starts to come back to, just these opportunities that I've not taken inspired action on, that right there is the moment to either take inspired action or be kind to myself and go, well, yeah, it didn't happen then, it's not happening right now, and Jesus, stop beating yourself up about it. That's amazing. I loved hearing that. And there's a lot that I can relate to, that I think about, that yeah, I'm going to take that forward, I think, because that's incredible. Be kind. I mean, you hear it all the time. There's a movement. Be kind. Like, be kind to yourself as well. Jesus. And also Wilson with motivation meaning something different to different people. It's individual, and what motivates me will be somebody else's absolute. They couldn't even imagine doing it, let alone be motivated for it. Love that. And that's another thing that links back to be kind to yourself, because there's often times that I go, I'm seriously into playing guitar. I'm a musician. I've been a musician for my entire life. And then over the last few years, over the last 15 years actually, it's dragged out quite a bit. I've played less and I just don't have the drive to do it anymore, as much as I really enjoy doing it, I think. And I beat myself up because I know people that are still motivated to do it, and I go, why am I not motivated for it? But yeah, it's just one of those things. Move on, try something, keep going, be kind to myself, and stop bullying myself for what other people are still into, and find what I'm into. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, stop bullying yourself.
Bit
Oh,
harsh.
that's beautiful. And I love what Alfie says in the chat. If something doesn't get done, maybe it was never ours to do in the first place. Yeah. It reminded me then, from everything that you've all said, that motivation is just feeling like I want to do something right now. And if I'm looking for that feeling, it's unlikely to occur, because it's such a, the feeling in the moment has got nothing to do with overthinking it. The feeling in the moment is just how I'm feeling in the moment. And then when I'm trying to look for the motivation, I'm actually thinking myself into a feeling that isn't motivated at all. Go on, Wilson.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that, so even when I was thinking about the word, Oh, it's gone now. Potential. And even you see, to see somebody's potential will kind of be to think about them. Do you know what I mean? Will kind of be to see what, like, you see a gem in your thoughts about them. Do you know what I mean? Of something they can do. So it kind of leads me to the same thing as motivation. It's like, I feel like to have motivation is to not be present, if that makes sense. Because I find that I like, is it fair to say that motivation comes from thinking? Do you know what I mean? And without being present, because just like potential, you see somebody, like you kind of foresee into a future of somebody that they can't see yet. So I feel like it's a bit of motivation. You kind of see into a future that you like and you want to fit, and it feels great. So therefore the motivation comes from that thought.
So I'll answer with what I heard in that, and then if it's not right, you can shout up. I think that it's all made up, and we all have our own perception of what motivation, inspiration, and it's all actually coming from, it is coming from thought. And when you actually feel like you want to do something, you're not thinking about motivation or inspiration or potential or anything, you're just doing it. And then it's when we're not sure that we start to look to, how do I motivate myself and how do I get inspired and all of those things. And an example is that, as I said, I like having all these different projects, but it's occurred to me more and more in the last 6 months that I really want to, well, actually in the last 12 months, but even more, I'm taking action on it now in the last 6 months, that I want to get more and more focused, that actually being focused in one direction feels like something I'd like to try. I see, like Dazzle said about guitaring, how people who are still doing that guitaring are now, doing whatever they're doing with it. And Derek talks, Wilson, you talk about your brother and how he's stuck with the juicy fruits thing. I think it's called juicy fruits.
Fruit Loops.
Fruit Loops. So what I'm thinking about. And how he's stuck with that. So I see out there, when people stick with something, they get really good at it, and they, they turn professional, and good things happen and everything. And I've seen that for myself, when you're persistent and make things happen. And that's what I've done as well in my past, like with Beyond Recovery, for instance. When you're persistent and you stick at it, there were times when I woke up and didn't want to go into prison. There were times when I literally on a Friday could barely walk because I was so tired from the week, and my knees were swollen and my head was mashed. And I thought, do I really want to do this? But there was something beyond me that kept me going, turning up, overcoming that, ignoring that, getting on with it. And that's different from recognizing, it's time to stop this. The time that feeling of it's time to stop this, it's a much more clear picture, even when it's painful. Like for everybody concerned, there's a clarity about that. This just isn't working right now. What do I need to do? And in my more recent, what would happen if I really get focused on this? How would that pan out? And then, I said that I've had a topsy-turvy couple of weeks. what's actually happened today is I've gone, oh, that means I could really stretch out this project. I don't have to cram it into 2 weeks. I could actually just take my time to make this thing happen. And that there was a feeling of lightness and so on. And without everything that's led to this moment, I might not have made that connection. I might have just gone on as I've gone on before and tried to cram it in and so on. It's not that I don't feel motivated to do the rest of the stuff. Is that my feeling of intention wants to have one focus right now, and so that's what I'm pointing at.
That fully makes a lot of sense, and I understand that. I'm just thinking about the times where, like, I know a lot of people that go gym, and some of them love the gym, and some people work in the gym now, and they proper love the everyday go to the gym. And then I know some other guys that they look forward to when, do you know what I mean, that summer body. So it's like they don't really enjoy going to the gym every day. They don't really enjoy the protein shakes, and they don't really enjoy all of that. But the motivation is to look big and buff. So it's like the motivation is from that thought of being big and buff, knowing that this might make me big and buff. And it even takes me to like college people and uni people when they go into professions and thinking, okay, and even police, when they go into profession thinking, I want to save people. And then it's like things, they go through all of that without enjoying it really. Like a lot of people don't really enjoy the uni work and the long lectures and all of those things, but the motivation of where it would get them, of where they think it would get them, kind of keeps them going through that. So it's even like me when I was young, we done the wrong things thinking it's for the right reason. So it's only the motivational thought of, okay, eventually this might help and this might da-da-da. I realized that when I took that thought process for actual motivation, that's where it was for me. It was just like, I would hold on to that thought process and then do whatever I have to do now until I get to that thought process, hoping I do get there. So I realized that, yeah, for me, that motivation is a lot with the thinking, man. It's a lot because, yeah, without that, I'm just present, you know what I mean? And I just do things. But I realize when I see potential in something, I'm at it, I'm on it, like, I want to do it, I want to help you, I want to do this, I want to do that for you because I see the potential and I see what could be, or I see how happy you could be, or I see how proud people will be, or whatever. But I see that kind of, yeah, potential feeds my motivation of that thinking of, yeah, let me help. Like even when you help somebody that just carry something across the road, it's like sometimes you will just do it, or more time you'll think, you know what, me helping this person across the road helps their day, so I'm going to do it. So you'll have that whole thought process of, do you know what, this will help their day. And I feel like that thought process motivates you to kind of grab their bags and help them across the road now. And then knowing that you've done that and then you've helped them, and that it kind of fuels your fire because you've done that and you've achieved that. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you've achieved that motivational task or whatever. But yeah, to me in my category, it just comes under that same thought process thing.
Yeah. Well, what you reminded me of, which is sort of how I wanted to round this up, really, is that all of the above is in the form, and we can play with it as much as we like, and we can think about it as much as we like, and actually it can take us down some right rabbit holes. and especially that thing about potential, you know, you see potential in someone, and actually then that becomes a pressure because you think that person should be this or should be that, because they've got so much potential. I know that I've done that with my son in the past, where but you've got so much potential, you're so brilliant at all of these things, you know, why do you want to work in a warehouse, or what, you know, why aren't you doing something with your life? And actually that's got nothing to do with me. that potential is just life, just living through that person. And for another human being to try and channel that into something is misguided. If we understand that potential is life force and life energy, and it can show up in so many ways, it doesn't really matter. And happiness and contentment and feeling good about your life is way more important than sort of realizing your potential. And of course, yeah, it's in the eye of the beholder. And then life, the thing that Wilson was talking about, going to the gym and things like that, actually, do we really know why we're doing any of that stuff? Because life is living through us, and the formless, or the spirit, or the essence of life that is living through us is just manifesting in the moment and doing what it's doing. And whether we do something or we don't do something is really irrelevant in the long term, and probably perfect. Because life is living through us, and we're not the ones in charge of that. We're the ones that's taking that and making it into form and playing with it in different ways on different days, and sometimes even in different moments of those days. So the thing isn't to be looking for this form of inspiration or motivation or anything else. The thing is to just be in lives, whatever that looks like. And I love that you brought kindness, and be kind about that, whatever that looks like. And I'll read this, and then we'll have a little roundup from the missing link. And I did just open the page, Dazzle. And this from the missing link, and the chapter on the chapter on wisdom. Spiritual wisdom lies within the consciousness of all living creatures. It is formless. The second it is revealed to human soul, it has taken on a form that can only represent its true nature. And this bit: once you become grateful, the prison bars of your mind will fall away. Peace of mind and contentment will be yours. The ego and our intellect are functions of our personal minds, whereas wisdom is a function of the spirit. One is mortal, the other immortal. Any final thoughts, words, comments? Nice to see you, Karen. So the inspired action from today is to just live your life. Lots of love, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
See you.
Bye, Listen. Thank you.